I suppose there's no clean way to begin a story like this. If I were braver, I'd say it out loud. I'm a married woman who had an affair. But I've learned people don't want the truth. They want redemption arcs. They want explanations, excuses. They want me to tell them that I was lonely, neglected, or that he forced himself into my life. But none of that would be true. I walked into it with my eyes open, and I would do it again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Claire. I turned 53 last spring. I've been married to my husband, Daniel, for 27 years. We live in a quiet suburb outside of Portland, in a cedar-sided house with a well-trimmed lawn and neighbors who wave, but never ask too much. We have 2 grown children, both out of the house. Daniel and I sleep in a king-sized bed with a dip in the middle. We have dinner every evening around 7, and most weekends we go to Costco together, buy wine we never finish, and talk about replacing the deck, but never do. We are the picture of stability. So maybe that's where the rot began. It was last August when Tom came to visit. My stepbrother. That word, stepbrother, feels too formal to describe someone I once tackled into a pile of leaves when we were kids. Someone who used to sneak ice cream sandwiches to me before dinner and sit cross-legged on the floor of my bedroom while I read magazines out loud. Our parents had married when I was 11 and he was 13. His father, my stepfather, was a calm, disciplined man who balanced out my flighty, artistic mother. They stayed married for 15 years before quietly splitting when I was already grown and gone. I hadn't seen Tom much after that. Life pulled us in different directions. He joined the Navy. I went to college. He got married. I got married. He divorced. I didn't. The last time I saw him in person was my mother's funeral, and even then, it was a blur of handshakes and casseroles. But earlier this year, he reached out. Said he'd be in Portland for work, something to do with shipping logistics, and would love to stop by. He hadn't seen Daniel in decades. He said he missed our old family talks. I didn't think much of it. I was flattered. A little nostalgic. I even made lasagna from scratch that night, something I hadn't done since the kids left the house. Daniel liked him immediately. They talked about football and stocks and something about vintage cars that bored me out of my mind. I watched them from the kitchen as I wiped down the counters, pretending not to notice how Tom had changed. His shoulders were broader. His voice deeper. He had this quiet confidence I didn't remember. His smile came slow, but when it did, it stayed just a little longer than polite. He smelled like cedar and clean soap. That detail stuck with me more than it should have. That night, after dinner, Daniel went upstairs to check the lock on the back window. We'd had some neighborhood kids messing around recently, and I sat across from Tom on the back patio, wine in hand, the air thick with late summer heat. "You look good, Claire," he said, and it wasn't a casual compliment. It was loaded. Intentional. I laughed, nervously, tugging at my cardigan. "Well, I clean up for company." He tilted his head. "No, I mean it. You look better now than when we were kids. Like you've grown into yourself." I should have deflected. I should have said something sisterly and safe. But I didn't. Instead, I took another sip of wine and looked him dead in the eye. "You look different too." "Better?" he asked. "Different," I repeated, but I knew I was lying. He looked like temptation. Something changed between us in that moment. Nothing physical. No lines crossed. But we both knew. After that, he stayed in town for a few more days. Said the hotel downtown was overpriced and offered to crash in our guest room if we didn't mind. Daniel was thrilled, said it was nice to have another man around. Someone to balance out the estrogen. Each morning, Tom joined me in the kitchen before Daniel woke up. We drank coffee and talked. About everything. About nothing. He remembered things I'd forgotten. My obsession with turquoise jewelry, the way I used to tuck my hair behind my ears when I was nervous. He watched me like he was cataloging me, piece by piece. The third morning, I caught him watching me stretch to reach the top shelf. His eyes lingered on my hips. "I never realized how beautiful you were back then," he said quietly. I turned around, heart thudding. "You shouldn't say that." "Why not?" "Because I'm married." He stepped closer. "Does he even see you anymore?" I couldn't answer. Not truthfully. That afternoon, Daniel had a dentist appointment and asked if I could stay home with Tom, maybe take him to the old trails near the creek we used to hike as kids. I said yes. Of course I did. We drove in silence, the radio low. The trailhead was quiet, empty except for a few mountain bikers in the distance. The late summer sun filtered through the trees, warm and golden. I wore shorts for the first time in months, feeling self-conscious, but also alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Halfway down the trail, I stopped. "I'm sweating like a pig," I said, trying to fan my neck. Tom stepped behind me, pulled my hair off my shoulders. His fingers were warm against my skin. "Let me." My breath caught. He didn't move. His hand stayed there, gently, like he was waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. Then he kissed me. Soft at first, hesitant, like he was giving me a chance to stop it. But I didn't. I kissed him back. Harder than I expected myself to. We didn't have sex then, not yet. But the dam had broken. I remember the drive home like a blur, my lips still swollen, my mind spinning. That night, I stood naked in front of the bathroom mirror while Daniel brushed his teeth. He glanced at me, then looked back down at his toothpaste. "You okay?" he mumbled through foam. I nodded. "Just warm." But the truth was I was on fire. The next day, Daniel went to work. I stayed home. Tom came into the kitchen wearing nothing but low-slung sweatpants, his hair wet from the shower. "You're playing with fire," I told him. He walked up behind me, pressed his chest to my back, his hands tracing the hem of my robe. "Then burn with me." I let him touch me, right there against the kitchen counter. His hands were rough, insistent. I remember the cold granite against my stomach, the way he pulled the robe down just enough to expose one shoulder, then the other. I remember the sounds I made, the way I bit down on a dish towel to keep from crying out too loud. Afterwards, I sat on the floor, knees weak, robe open. He knelt beside me, kissed the side of my face. "I've wanted this for a long time," he whispered. That's when I knew this wasn't just lust. Not entirely. He had wanted me. Not the version of me I showed the world, but me. The full, complicated, aging, aching me. And I wanted him back. It didn't end there. It couldn't. The next morning felt different. I didn't feel guilty, not exactly. Not in the way you'd expect. There was no violent rush of shame, no tears in the shower or silent self-flagellation. I felt shaken, yes. Exposed. But also electric. As if some part of me had been asleep for years and finally cracked open like a window after a long winter. The air rushing, it was equal parts sweet and dangerous. Tom and I barely spoke that morning. Not in the strained, regretful way that follows a mistake, but like two people who'd just joined a pact. Daniel left for work around 7:30, same as always, his routine so ingrained I could recite it like a prayer. He kissed my cheek, his lips cool and unthinking. "You look flushed," he said absently. "Didn't sleep great," I murmured. He nodded, then was gone. I heard the door shut. I heard his car back out of the driveway. And then it was just Tom and me. He appeared in the kitchen a few minutes later, wearing jeans and one of Daniel's old t-shirts, still barefoot, hair slightly damp. He didn't smile.
He didn't ask how I felt.
Instead, he stepped behind me at the sink, pressed his hand low against my back, and whispered, "I've been hard since last night." My knees nearly buckled. "I can't," I started, but his hands slid up my sides, not hurried, not frantic. Just steady. Possessive. My body answered him before my mouth could. We didn't even make it to a bed that time. It happened against the hallway wall, slow, deliberate, and overwhelming. The kind of intimacy that floods your senses and leaves you dumb and shaking. When it was over, we lay on the carpet in a patch of sunlight, silent. "Do you regret it?" I asked finally. He looked at me, serious. Not for a second. I didn't say it back, but I felt it in my bones. After that day, everything in my life split into before and after. Before Tom came back into my life, I had been Claire, the wife, the mother, the dependable one.
I cooked, I plannet, I volunteered.
I lived inside a calendar full of dentist appointments and dinner parties. But after I became something else. Something I'd forgotten I could be. Desired.
Bold. Alive.
I wasn't stupid. I knew the risk. I wasn't some naive girl sneaking around behind a high school boyfriend. I was a 53-year-old woman with a mortgage and a husband who trusted me. And yet every moment I spent with Tom made me crave the next. Every time I swore it would be the last time, he'd find some new way to touch me that made me fall apart all over again. He stayed in the guest room, and we developed a code of silence. We never texted about it, never acknowledged anything when Daniel was in the room. But late at night, when the house was quiet and I couldn't sleep, I'd find myself slipping out of bed and into the hall. Sometimes, he'd already be waiting at his door. There was a night, Thursday, I think, when Daniel fell asleep early after 2 glasses of wine. I lay beside him for 20 minutes, heart pounding, listening to the rhythm of his breath. Then I crept out, wearing nothing but a robe. Tom opened his door the moment I knocked. He didn't say a word,
Just stepped aside and let me in.
we made love quietly, almost reverently, like it was something sacred. He kissed every inch of me, even the places I was self-conscious about. Especially those places. Why do you do that? I whispered once, as he pressed his lips to the stretch marks on my stomach. Because they're part of you, he said. And I want all of you. I cried that night. Not loud, heaving sobs. Just a single tear that slipped down as he held me in the dark, his fingers tracing circles on my back. I hadn't been touched like that in years. But of course, real life doesn't stay paused forever. The following week, Daniel announced that his sister was coming to town and needed the guest room for 2 nights. I smiled and nodded like a dutiful wife, but inside I panicked. Tom might need to find a hotel, Daniel said offhandedly. Unless he doesn't mind crashing on the couch. Tom played along perfectly. No worries, man. Couch is fine. That night, I barely looked at him during dinner.
My nerves were raw.
I felt exposed in my own kitchen, every clink of silverware too loud, every glance from Tom too pointed. After Daniel went to bed, I came downstairs under the guise of checking the thermostat. Tom was stretched out on the couch, shirtless, scrolling his phone. He looked up. You okay? I shook my head, suddenly on the verge of tears. I hate this. I feel insane. He sat up, pulled a blanket over his lap. Come here. I can't. She's right upstairs. I won't touch you. Just sit with me.
So I did.
I curled up next to him like I used to do when I was a teenager, and he was the only safe thing in my life. He wrapped his arm around me, kissed the top of my head. I think about you all the time, he whispered. Even before this? Especially before this.
I turned to him, stunned.
You mean back then? He nodded. Even when we were kids. I knew it wasn't normal, but I couldn't help it. I always felt something for you. That shook me. Because I had, too. Even as a girl, I remembered thinking of him differently. Not in a sexual way, not then, but something deeper. A closeness that didn't feel like sibling affection. More like the magnetism of 2 people who were meant to orbit each other. And now we were finally close enough to collide. The next day, his flight was scheduled. He was supposed to leave by 11 a.m. I woke early, restless, and met him outside by the car while Daniel showered upstairs. We didn't kiss. We just stood there in the cool morning air. The distance between us unbearable. I could cancel my flight, he said.
No, iwi sparat.
You should go. He reached out, cupped my face in both hands. Claire, this doesn't feel like a fling. It's not. Then what do we do? I swallowed hard. We wait.
We think.
We figure out what this means. He nodded, reluctant. Will you write me? No, I said, surprising even myself. But you'll know when I'm ready. Then he got into the car, started the engine, and drove away. I stood in the driveway until he was out of sight, my heart heavier than it had been in years. But it wasn't over. Not even close. What came next would test everything I thought I knew about myself, my marriage, my body, my desires. 3 days after Tom left, I woke up crying. Not loud. Not even dramatic. Just quiet tears on my pillow while Daniel slept beside me, his back turned, his breathing even and shallow. I watched the ceiling, counting the tiny cracks in the plaster, feeling like someone had scooped something out of me and left the space hollow and echoing. I didn't hear from Tom. Not a text. Not a call. No cryptic messages. And I'd told him not to write, hadn't I? I'd insisted on it, told him it was cleaner this way, smarter. But now I was haunted by his absence. His silence was deafening. It followed me everywhere. Into the grocery store, into the garden, even into bed at night. And Daniel, he hadn't noticed a thing. He was the same, affectionate in a vague, distant way. Always asking if I needed anything. Always assuming I didn't. One night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, wearing nothing but a towel. I stared at my reflection for a long time. I saw the soft sag of my belly, the crow's feet around my eyes, the stretch marks that curled like soft ribbons down my hips. But I also remembered how Tom had kissed each of those marks, like they were treasures. My body had been invisible for years, until he made me feel like art. A week passed. Then another. The silence was unbearable. So I broke it. I wrote him an email.
Just a few lines.
No subject.
No greeting.
I can't sleep. I can't think straight. I miss the way you look at me. He replied 5 hours later. I haven't looked at another woman since I left your driveway. I didn't even make it through the rest of the day before I responded. And just like that, the fire was lit again. We started emailing carefully.
No sexting.
No dirty photos. We weren't teenagers. This was worse, more dangerous, more addictive. It was emotional. It was intimate. Some days we wrote only once. Some days we sent 10 messages before noon. We talked about music, memories, the things we'd never said aloud before. I told him about how Daniel hadn't really touched me in years. Not the way a man should touch a woman. How routine had slowly strangled all passion from our marriage until I felt like a well-dressed ghost moving from room to room. He told me he hadn't been in love in over a decade, that his marriage had made him feel small, controlled, sexless. I don't want to just exist anymore, he wrote. Neither did I. By October, we'd made a plan. Tom had a conference in Seattle, 3 hours away. He suggested I come, just for the weekend. No one would know. Daniel was scheduled for a golf trip with a friend from college. I'll be gone anyway, I told him casually. Taking a few days to visit my cousin in Olympia. Daniel didn't ask questions. He kissed my forehead and helped me load the car, completely unaware that I was going to be with another man. And not just any man. My stepbrother. I met Tom in a hotel near Pike Place, the kind with too many pillows and dim, romantic lighting. I arrived first, heart pounding so hard I had to sit down before I could take off my coat. The knock came just after 4 p.m. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel fear. I felt home. He stepped inside and dropped his bag, and then we were kissing, stumbling, stripping, devouring each other with a hunger that had only grown in the weeks apart. We didn't even make it to the bed. We ended up on the floor by the window, tangled in half-buttoned shirts and moans muffled against skin. He knew my body like he'd studied it, like it was a poem he'd memorized and could now recite with his hands. Later, as the city lights flickered through the window, we lay in bed, bare and unashamed. I've never felt this close to someone, he said softly. I turned to him. Not even when we were kids?
He shook his head.
Especially not then. It was always you, Claire. But I never thought I'd have you. You don't have me, I whispered. His jaw tensed. Then why are you here? I didn't answer. Because the truth scared me. I didn't know who I was anymore. A faithful wife. A traitor? A woman rediscovering herself? Maybe all of them. The weekend passed in a blur of soft sheets, whispered confessions, and long, slow touches. We ordered room service. We talked late into the night. We explored each other's minds with the same curiosity we explored each other's bodies. By the time Sunday arrived, I felt raw. Tom walked me to my car in the underground garage, his hand wrapped tightly around mine like he was afraid I'd slip through his fingers. Don't go back to him, he said quietly. I froze. He stepped in closer. I know what we're doing is messy, but you can't tell me you don't feel this. Not just the sex. All of it. You and me, it's real. My throat tightened. I have a life, I whispered. A marriage. A reputation. I can't just throw it all away for this.
For love, he said.
Call it what it is. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't brave enough. So I left. Back home, things felt muted. Daniel never suspected. He was in a good mood from his trip, chatting about weather and traffic and old stories from college. I smiled and nodded in all the right places, but I felt like a foreigner in my own skin. I couldn't stop comparing. His kisses were dry and quick. His hands were mechanical. He touched me out of routine, not desire. One night, he came up behind me while I was folding laundry, wrapped his arms around my waist. I missed you, he said softly. I nodded, but my heart twisted. I didn't miss him. I missed feeling alive. And that feeling had a name.
Tom.
I didn't plan for it to happen again. But of course it did. 2 weeks later, he showed up. No warning. Just knocked on the door in the middle of the afternoon while Daniel was at work. I opened it, breathless, stunned. What are you doing here? I couldn't wait anymore, he said and pulled me into him, his kiss fierce and desperate. We didn't speak again for a long time. This time, we made it to the bedroom. The same bed I shared with Daniel. The same sheets. The same headboard. I should have felt sick. Instead, I felt whole. Afterwards, as we lay tangled in the aftermath, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "What are we doing?" Tom turned to me, brushed a strand of hair from my face. "We're waking up." I knew then that I couldn't keep this up forever. I was balancing on a knife's edge, and someone was bound to fall. But I also knew one thing with terrifying certainty. I didn't want to go back to sleep. By November, the guilt began to set in, not in sharp bursts like a slap across the face, but in slow, creeping waves. It didn't come when I lay with Tom, or when he whispered my name against my neck, or even when we stole afternoons in hotel rooms under aliases and paid in cash. No, it came later, at odd moments. Like when Daniel poured my coffee without asking how I liked it, simply because he already knew. Or when I found a decades-old anniversary card tucked into a drawer, his handwriting so familiar it broke something in me. There was a time when I would have cried from shame. Now, I cried because I didn't miss that woman anymore. I didn't want to be the good wife. I didn't want the tidy house and the carefully scheduled intimacy and the quiet dinners with our couple's friends who all wore the same perfume and told the same stories. I wanted Tom. The affair became impossible to hide. Not because we were careless. We weren't. We still never texted anything explicit, never left traces, never said the wrong names at the wrong times. But my body gave me away. Daniel noticed first in small ways. He started watching me across the dinner table, his eyes a little more curious. He touched me more often, as if trying to reassert some claim. And one night, out of nowhere, he asked, "Are you happy?"
I dropped the spoon I was drying.
"What?" "With us. With this life." I turned slowly. "Why are you asking?" He hesitated. "I don't know. You seem different lately." I forced a smile, the kind that didn't touch my eyes. "Midlife hormones, probably." He nodded, like that made perfect sense. But his brow stayed furrowed, his hand resting too long on the counter, as if anchoring himself. I went upstairs, locked the bathroom door, and cried for a long time. Not because he'd figured it out. Because I knew he hadn't, and yet part of him still sensed the shift. And that kind of knowing, the quiet knowing, felt more tragic than confrontation. One cold Sunday morning, Tom called me. He never called. That was our rule. But he did. His voice was rough, too early, too intimate. "I had a dream about you last night. I was in the garage cleaning out old paint cans and boxes of Christmas lights. Was it a good one?" "It was. And then I woke up and felt like I'd lost you." Something in me cracked. "I'm here," I whispered. "Not really," he said. "You're still choosing him." I didn't answer. Tom exhaled slowly. "I can't keep doing this, Claire. I love you. I need to know. Are you ever going to leave him?" It wasn't the first time he'd asked, but it was the first time he asked without hope in his voice.
And I didn't know what to say.
I don't have an answer, I finally said. I wish I did. I'm not going to be your secret forever, he said gently. I deserve more than stolen weekends. You do, I said, the ache in my chest growing. You deserve everything. Then why won't you give it to me? I couldn't speak. We sat in silence until he hung up. I stood there in the cold garage, surrounded by half-forgotten holiday decorations, my breath visible in the air, and realized the affair had stopped being an escape. It had become a question, one I could no longer avoid. The breaking point came in December. Daniel planned a romantic weekend getaway for our anniversary. A cabin near the coast, just the two of us. He booked massages, brought champagne, made an effort. It should have melted me. Instead, I felt like a guest in someone else's fantasy. The food was fine. The bed was soft. The conversation was gentle, easy, predictable. But I was not there. My body was there, dressed in soft sweaters and expensive scarves. But my mind, my heart, they were 3 hours north, in a cramped apartment above a bookstore where Tom lived now alone. The final night, Daniel touched me, tenderly, respectfully, like someone tending to an old injury. And for the first time in my life, I imagined someone else while being with my husband. When it was over, he curled around me and whispered, "I love you." I stared at the ceiling and felt a tear slip silently across my temple. "I know," I whispered. The drive home was quiet. I watched the trees blur past the window, my hands in my lap, and I made the decision without even speaking it. I couldn't live like this anymore. 2 days later, I asked Tom to meet me. Not at a hotel. Not in secret. Just a quiet coffee shop 20 minutes outside town. He walked in looking older than he had in October. Tired. Thinner. But when he saw me, his face lit up like it used to. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure I would." He sat across from me, his hand covering mine. "What is it?" he asked gently. "Tell me." I took a breath. "I'm going to tell Daniel." He froze. "I don't know what happens after that," I added. "I'm not promising I'll be ready for anything right away. I might need space. I might need time. But I can't live 2 lives anymore." His eyes glistened. "Are you sure?" "No," I said. "But I'm more sure than I've been about anything in years." He nodded slowly. "Okay, then I'll wait." And just like that, we sat there in quiet agreement. Not as lovers sneaking behind backs, but as 2 people on the brink of something real and terrifying. I told Daniel that evening. He sat at the kitchen table while I stood by the sink, unable to look at him directly. "There's someone else," I said. The silence was profound. After a long minute, he cleared his throat. "How long?" I hesitated. "A few months." His hands trembled slightly on the table. He didn't yell, didn't call me names. He just looked broken. "Is it serious?" he asked, voice low. "Yes," I whispered. "It is." He nodded, slowly, mechanically, then stood up, walked past me, and climbed the stairs. That night, we didn't speak. The next morning, he packed a small bag and left for his sister's. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared hundreds of meals. The same table where I'd once pretended to be happy. Now, I wasn't pretending anymore. Tom came over that evening. Not to celebrate. Not to claim anything. Just to hold me. We lay together in the quiet, the house feeling too big, too full of memory. He didn't speak until I did. "I don't know what happens now," I said. "You don't have to," he whispered. "Just let yourself feel." And I did. I let myself feel the grief, the loss, the guilt, and underneath it all, the freedom. It's been nearly a year now. Daniel and I separated quietly. No public drama. Just 2 adults with too much history and not enough passion left to pretend anymore. Tom and I didn't rush into living together. We took it slow, careful, honest. Some days, I still feel like I'm standing on a cliff's edge, wind whipping through me, unsure if I've made the right choices. But most days, Most days I feel like I've finally come home to myself. And in that quiet, steady love Tom gives me, the kind that doesn't need hiding or shame, I've found something I didn't even know I was missing. Myself. And this time, I'm not going back to sleep.